First of all, good morning. Thanks for being here in the audience. In this panel about international ecosystems, we have today with 3 representatives of different early stage funds here, 2 Sergios and Michèle. And we're going to cover this topic. Before introducing yourself, so you can explain a little bit more what you do, we want to point out in what phase they invest, okay? Because different VCs invest in different phases. And today we are here with teams that invest in very early stage, supporting entrepreneurs before project itself in that phase. So that phase, we're going to start with the presentations. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're called Antler. We're one of the largest early stage venture capital funds globally, present in 26 different geographies, and we got around 900 companies, 950 probably by now, in our portfolio. Our investment thesis is pretty simple. We're sector agnostic and we're stage focused, which means that our first check is sometimes pre-team, as in we commit with investing to investing with founders that have just met each other and they're at the very beginning of it. And then from that moment onwards, we follow all the way to Series C today, but always as a follower. So we're the first check, not the last one, hopefully. And we like to feed the ecosystem and help entrepreneurs who are just starting to create the next level.
Great. Thank you, Sergio.
Yes, hi. I'm Michèle. I'm representing Tenity, previously known as F10. We are an incubator open innovation ecosystem, very much focused on fintech, insurtech, regtech, so born out of actually the SIX Swiss stock exchange and associated very much with that area. We also focus very much early stage, so pre-seed, founder teams usually already with an idea or an MVP, and we are not yet quite as large as Antler or Startup Wise Guys. We are in 4 hubs right now, covering mainly Europe and Asia, with Zurich and Singapore kind of as the main and most important hubs, but also present in Spain and in Estonia.
My name is Sergio Borasino. I represent the Startup Wise Guys. This company has got 11 years in this ecosystem, let's call it like this. Of course, we do very early stage investment. We have funded so far over 400 startups. In my case, what I do for my role within the organization, it's dual. On one hand, I'm a partner for a cybersecurity fund. On the other one, I run the Founders Club. Founders Club is similar as Antler. We start with people, and we help them to get to revenues, and then we make an investment. Post-acceleration, we take the companies we like, put in some money, and provide this acceleration course that help them to be successful. So far, I think we're doing pretty good. We have conducted 13 exits, and we have yielded a result for investors of 22 times their money. So we're pretty proud about that, as you can see.
Great. So we're gonna start with the questions. So the panel is about ecosystems, right? And the question is for Michèle. What do you think the different agents should look after in the development of an ecosystem from a more holistic level? What actually makes an ecosystem more successful then? Or what are the key factors of success for an ecosystem whenever they're developing?
How much time do we have? No.
26 minutes.
No, I think ecosystem is a huge topic, right? And we could probably spend 2 hours just discussing ecosystem and ecosystem building and what is an ecosystem. And I think the key for me is that there's many different ecosystems, right? There's not one. Probably starting from Tenity's point of view, there's our ecosystem, right, where we try to bring people together that are relevant for success for the startups, but also for the local economy, for the investors, for everybody that's involved. But then you also have the kind of the local ecosystem, the city, the region, the country. Then we have kind of vertical specific, right? We build like fintech ecosystem. So I think one thing is to understand that there's so many different ones, but I think all have in common that they want to bring relevant players together to create really kind of win-win-win-win-win-win situations, really, because at the end of the day, we want to see successful startups, but then you also have the kind of the local ecosystem, the city, the region, the country. Then we have kind of vertical specific, right? We build like fintech ecosystem. So I think one thing is to understand that there's so many different ones, but I think all have in common that they want to bring relevant players together to create really kind of win-win-win-win-win situations, really, because at the end of the day, we want to see successful startups, if we invest in a startup that ends up being successful, we win, right? The co-investors win, the economy wins because we create employment, we create benefits, and ultimately also the mentors, experts, everybody that's involved really gets something from it. I think that's actually the really beautiful thing of what we do. Obviously, we want to make money, and we need to make money to survive, right? We want to see successful investments, but beyond that, if we win, kind of everybody wins that's involved. And so I think we need to make sure that we bring as many people together as possible, kind of create those serendipitous moments. So create events, create formats where you bring startup, entrepreneurs, founders, previous founders, even alumni, investors, public associations, nonprofits, everybody that has an interest in fomenting that, entrepreneurial drive and hope. It's always a little bit of a luck, right? And we try to force luck, I guess, to make those connections that then bring the startups a step forward.
Great. And what are the keys? How would you describe them? The keys for success, for an ecosystem
keys.
to be more developed than the other one. What are those key ingredients that have to be there?
Yeah, you need to have a good investor network. I think people need to be, there needs to be money, right? I think there's, key founders, people who have ideas and want to push for it, but then you also need kind of that support network of an investment community. You need also regulation and kind of an environment, a business environment that foments that and that kind of builds that framework that makes it easier. And ultimately, you need a market that, and obviously projects that really focus on a problem that's big enough. But I think there's not one key factor, right? But it's just, as we said, many, many different things that play together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great, thanks. Sergio, with Antler, you're present supporting entrepreneurs across 6 continents. We're living very turbulent times, right? Especially when you're globalized, you're facing them in a more interactive way. What are the biggest challenges that you're facing in a global perspective? And would you point out specific ones that you're facing in specific ecosystems more than other ones?
Yeah, we're in 26 different ecosystems, which cover around 80 to 83% of all the seed rounds globally. That's kind of a rough benchmark. It's quite curious because when you think about venture capital and the companies that are backed by venture capital, they haven't been around for that long. They've been around since 1950s, early 60s. Mm-hmm. So the whole of humankind went through most of its period without having the need for venture capital, right? So there's a ton of great business models out there. There are very specific models that are venture capital led. Now, these tend to have come, if you look until the late 90s and early 2000s, 80 to 90% of all VC dollars were based out of the US. And then from then onwards, you start having VC dollars first in Europe and then Southeast Asia and Asia differently. So what we see is, we see very different behaviors depending on for how long an ecosystem has been exposed. Ecosystems that typically have been exposed to 3, 4, 5 rounds in which founders created, they grew, they got invested, they had an exit, those tend to be a lot more resilient because when you're facing a downturn, what you're typically looking into is there's a little bit of wobbliness in the system, and therefore, if you haven't seen a downturn yet, you're going to be a lot more scared than if you had seen it before. So the fear that you see, and I think it's a fear that doesn't cover only venture capital and venture capital-backed companies, but it covers the whole economy, is it seems that we're somehow peaking. It seems that the world's going to implode economically. We don't know exactly what's happening. So in essence, this can be translated into uncertainty. What we see in ecosystems that have had rounds of uncertainty is that they have been able to survive. If you look into Iberia, it's a really good example of, for instance, Portugal versus Spain. Spain had somehow 2 or 3 generations of founders, right? The late 90s, early 2000s, there were a couple of very successful companies in Spain, but Portugal didn't. So you see that there's a level of resilience in which when things start getting a little bit trickier, people don't run to the exits anymore. But obviously they are a lot more scared than they would be in London or in the US. So those kind of underlying structural and just it's memory, right? If you've seen things going bad and then going good again, you have memory that's going to go good. And then honestly, there's cultural to it, right? Northern European countries tend to be a lot more open to failure. We Southerners don't like failure that much. Southeast Asia is a different play, Latin America, and so on and so forth. So it's a mix. What I would say is what we see in different ecosystems, the underlying causes, uncertainty, deglobalization in some cases, you see them across. How they get interpreted and how the reaction to risk happens tends to vary on the local culture of each ecosystem, but also how long they've been around and if they have gone through it or not.
Interesting. Thanks, Sergio. Now we have the other Sergio here. A startup wise guys present in other ecosystems, but you have been also actively here in Bilbao, collaborating with the government, acceleration programs, being part of BAT Acceleration Tower, and this ecosystem that I would say that maybe as an entrepreneurial economy in terms of business and industry, we have many generations of experience, but not that many benchmarks in software, right? And I think you have that perspective of being in other ones and then being here as well. What makes us different? And is there any differentiation point that actually makes us also interesting compared to other ones? If yes, which ones are those differentiations?
I think the situation now in Bilbao is very interesting for many reasons. First of all, if you think about the economy, we are on one of the top 3 comunidades autónomas, and there's a big and ambitious industry behind. And, look at the biggest banks in the world, you got one in there, right? And they need innovation. So in our case, we're focused on B2B. So this makes perfect sense, to be here. Then, on the other hand, the government, it's committed to make it happen. So they're helping us to bring more entrepreneurs here, to celebrate congresses. We got a gathering a couple of weeks ago. It was really nice in Estadio San Mamés, and it's easy to deal with, which is not the experience we have had in other cities in Spain, right? Where some things were, easy, others were really hard. The team is quite good, very supportive, and they have a budget, and they have also some, connections within the government to make things happen, like work visas and stuff that help to them. Finally, there's also the fact that the city is quite nice. Food is incredible. It's not that expensive. You have everything in walking distance, almost, right? There are big plans for development here. And finally, we also think that this is a market which is still to be developed. So there's space for more VCs to come. We're hoping that to happen because that's part of how an ecosystem works. And the final part that is also that, the evaluations that you get in this place most of the times are lower than in big cities throughout Europe, right? So all of that helps. Going back to the comments about how to build these ecosystems, I think they are in the right path. Not there yet, but probably in the right path of, gathering this set of people and companies to make it happen.
And from that perspective, and in that case, we also being part of the ecosystem here, what shall we do? What is left there? What are the homeworks that we still have to work on to actually be at the same level of standards compared to other cities? Taking into account that we're different, for sure, and we have a different size, and that makes us also different, and we have a different background. But what are the homeworks that we have to work on?
Well, critical mass, basically, right? Because, for instance, we started in the Baltics. Tallinn went through this movement a few years ago where, some unicorns came out from that, and now it's still like a tech city. So, sorry. The Estonian government is very helpful. You can set up a company online, for instance, in less than 1 day. If you go to Italy, for instance, it takes you a month, right? But these things are happening here. What we need here probably is, to continue this support, to get more people coming in and consolidate as a hub. There's sort of competition now in between various cities around, and they just, I guess they need to take the lead, right?
Good. Okay, now it's going to be more an open question. So, if we compare entrepreneurs and ecosystems, local and international ones, and we look at startups, how do you think that they're in the race of fundraising? What is the position of our startups compared to other ones? You talk about price or valuations a bit lower when we are focusing in our local ecosystem here in the Basque Country, but that shouldn't be the reason for somebody to invest in our startups. How are we positioned compared to other nationalities, and what are the differentiations from a competitiveness point of view, not only from being cheap, right? You think?
Well, I guess we are in a global market, so it's very hard for me to, put in a box Spanish companies. A lot of times, there's a pre-COVID world and a post-COVID world. Pre-COVID, it was a world where, they were sitting in the same office, and to get some investment from a VC, it was a personal interaction. Now, that's not the case. I mean, we're working on a daily basis with founders that they have only met through the screen, and they're about to meet in person. And going fundraising, it's also the same thing. I mean, they even don't want you to go to the office. Well, that was when we were closer to the end of the COVID thing, right? So I think that's the way things are running now. Regarding Spain itself, I think, it works like different comunidades autónomas have different rules, and, they are still in the way to make this happen for them. Right?
I think it's, from my side, I think it's probably the best time ever to build a company, right? So if you're starting something now, you're starting in, like Sergio was saying, you're starting in a post-COVID world, you're starting in a post kind of pre-configuration of global dynamics type of world, and you're starting at the moment where markets are at the drop. So if you're an entrepreneur, there's three things you need to have. You need to have talent, you need to have customers, and you need to have capital. Now, talent disappeared over the last 5 years. It was extremely expensive. As an early stage startup, you cannot hire a good engineer if they're going somewhere and being paid 400K. That's your whole round. That thing has disappeared because some of the hyper-growth companies have significantly pared down, right? So it's so much easier now to find exceptional people, and it's so much easier for them to come with, because even if they're in big companies, these companies have stabilized. And great engineers, great talent wants to create something new. So that's fundamental. When you think about customers, there has been a massive retraction, but it also means that customers right now are focusing on the core. So if you're building core, if you're building for it being B2B or B2C, but if you're building for the core needs, if you drop down to the base of the Maslow pyramid, that's where you want to be, and that's kind of the perfect place. And then capital, which is obviously harder to find nowadays. But harder nowadays doesn't mean it's going to be harder in 2 or 3 or 4 years. If you were thinking about raising 100 or 200 or 400 million round today, I would say, well, the numbers show you that the drop has been between 50 to 75%. Now, if you're starting a company today, that type of money will be raised in 4 or 5 years. Any economic cycle goes down and then comes up again. So you're going to be building, for an entrepreneur who's starting now, they're going to be building in a moment where they can have the best talent out there. They have their customers focused on the core aspects of their business, and then they're going to be getting the upswing in terms of valuations, in terms of capital, liquidity, where you want to call it in the market, at the exact moment in time where you want to go. And this is quite literally the flip side of starting a company 12 months ago or 18 months ago, when it felt really good, but it was probably, you were coming into the party just before the last song played.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I'd love to add a couple of points. One about, I think, what maybe startups here need, right, to be competitive, and also just to kind of come back to a really early stage investment. In our experience, I don't know, maybe yours was different, at our stage, where we invest at pre-seed, it tends to be super local. I don't know if that's my microphone, but let's see how it goes. It tends to be super local, so I think it is important to right? To build this, also maybe educate and bring more potential investors in. I think that's what you're doing as well, like make this more accessible, educate people to really start investing at very early stage. That's kind of, a really important part to get this thriving ecosystem going. And then I think also startups need to think international first, right, from the beginning. Today you can't build a tech startup and just think in your local market. You need to be prepared to think beyond the borders, Europe, the world. I mean, of course you start in one market, right, but your mindset needs to be already in growth mode and thinking about the next steps. And I agree. I think it's a great time right now. Startups need patience, grit, but I think that makes them even more prepared to then, really capitalize when the market goes up again.
That's a very good point as well. To have this international vision, now that we're talking about international ecosystems, where it's true that we start here and the companies start here, and you should have a market where you have to validate, and there is a market fit and product market fit and so on, but you don't have an ambition to grow. The market is going to start being too small very quickly. And then you need VCs that are going to be supporting you in other phases, and those are going to be international. For sure. So I think that's a very good perspective as well. And sometimes we focus to be too much local here and don't have this open-minded vision, and it's going to happen really quick and even quicker than we expect, especially now that a lot of international VCs are also interested in the early pre-seed and very early stages here, because the opportunities are interesting and they see this opportunity to expand in a way, in better valuations than those in the domestic markets. So I'm sure that was a good point. So to finalize, we're going to play a little bit,
Can I
go ahead.
add something to build on
Sure.
that one? I was looking to the stats of the companies that we have in the portfolio,
Yep.
and last year, what we got is that, when they were after capital for the VCs, the difference in between this year and last year, it was that it was taking like 2 or 3 times for them to find the money. So it's more knocking doors, it's more job, but you can get the money. And if you think about this and the way venture capital works, which they have this fund and they have a period to invest, I mean, they're probably nowadays a little bit behind the timeline. So I also agree, it's a beautiful moment to start. And if the idea is good, and you get the traction, you are going to get investment. So I wouldn't be afraid of that. And it's at least a 10 years journey. So just go, what are the chances that you get no crisis in this frame of time, right?
Yeah, I think we're coming from a party, right? From a party mood.
Exactly.
And then there's a correction in the market where I think it's always positive, right? And the good companies are going to be standing out from those that were maybe more mass. And when the money is flowing into the market, then everybody, maybe not everybody, but there's more probabilities to get funded. And now I think some funds are still holding on and seeing what's happening. And then also from a perspective of the investors, those funders that are now raising the next ones, money is scary usually, right? And that's why I was going to ask the next questions, right? Playing a little bit crystal ball, to have your opinion about how do you see 2024, and if you have to give a tip to both entrepreneurs and investors, potential LPs of these new funds that will continue supporting those entrepreneurs in this current situation.
Yeah, I think we went from a period where it was better to be lucky than good to a period where it's better to be good than lucky, which is how things should be going. And that's a really important thing. It's not great that it's a frothy environment if someone can come with a PowerPoint and then raise 10 mil. And it's not because they're making a mistake, it's because the good companies out there probably have better teams that have better product, but they won't be able to raise, or they'll be able to raise, but they won't have the access to talent. So going from good to lucky, or lucky to good, it's really important. So I think for me, that's the most important kind of aspect. Now you need to be good. The only tip of advice is grit. Like, grit beats everything, right? You just got to keep on going at it. And it doesn't matter how many times you drop, it doesn't matter how many times you fail, you have to go for it. And you have to figure out what is your competitive advantage. When we invest in something, The question I always ask myself is the problem large enough, and do they have an unfair competitive advantage at solving it, this specific team? And you were talking about that, and this concept of ecosystem is a really good one. Like, in the Basque Country, you have such a strong presence on energy that it could be a really good place, even if you're not a local, right? I'm from Lisbon, and Lisbon has a different vibe to it. You go to Madrid, and there's a different vibe. So figuring out how you, as a company founder, can place yourself in the best environment to access talent, to access capital, to access the customers and the payer and the decision makers, it's going to be a massive difference. And I feel that it's always better to be in a place where you have to be good instead of just lucky to succeed.
Good point. Tips. What are the tips for entrepreneurs and potential investors of new funds?
In my case?
Yeah.
Do your homework.
Okay.
Like, go through decks, talk to founders. Everyone here is always on the phone with a founder. Like, last night during dinner, I was out on the phone with a founder. This morning, I was on the phone with a founder. Like, you fall asleep thinking about founders, and you wake up thinking about founders. If you're a founder, you fall asleep thinking about your business, and ideally wake up in the middle of the night thinking about your business, because that's how you unlock these things. John Cleese was in Monty Python. He used to say that he wasn't the best of Monty Python, and this was like an English comedy troupe, but he would go so much at it. Instead of spending 5 minutes, he would spend 5 hours, and then he would end up with the best jokes. And it's the same thing with founders. If you spend enough time at it, you'll probably be able to crack it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, what you said, because I think that is enthusiasm. When you are enthusiastic about something that you do, the meaning of enthusiasm comes from ethos, which means God within you. When you're passionate about what you're doing, when you're enthusiastic about what you do, what they say is that is about work and lack. It's not lack, it's because is working towards that. So that's a good point. Yep, thanks.
Yeah, happy to add. Can you hear? Fine? Good, perfect. So still with the mic issues here. No, I think from an investor perspective, I think it's really, there's a million strategies, right? You can follow. I think, obviously doing your due diligence, really getting to know people. I think it's the human factor is as important as the idea, if not more, actually, that you have the right team that you're backing. But also, I think we are all at this super early stage. And we follow the strategy of kind of massive diversification, right? We invest in hundreds of companies at a very early stage, and then we double down. And I think that is, especially now in the situation that we are in, is probably even more attractive almost. One, you have obviously founders that are building now, which is not an easy environment. They need to focus on actually solving a problem, being very solid, having everything kind of going for them in order to attract and funding and being successful, and then really having that kind of diversification and seeing a lot of teams. And I know this is obviously not accessible potentially to every single individual investor, but looking at very early stage, I think is very interesting right now. Obviously I have to say that, right? That's our business model. No, but I do think this is also where even if you're new to it, this is where you really learn. You talk to so many people, so many teams, and I think you can't do this without the gut feeling, really, and you only get that by, exposing yourself and talking to as many people as you can. And then for startups, I think, my message and what we tell our founders is, be really efficient with the money that you have, extend your runway as much as you can, keep going, find your people, in the sense, find your investors, right? If you have a good project, if you have a real problem you solve, there are going to be investors that are passionate about that, but it will take longer. And so it's that grit, and I think that's just the key message here. Have grit, really believe in it, and I think trust in your abilities.
Great, thanks, Michèle.
Well,
Last one.
there's nothing else for me to predict about what's coming.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do the crystal ball of 2024. What do you think? Predictions?
It's really hard because, the macroeconomy is going crazy and it's not following the patterns that it followed before in some senses. So now you can find different kind of investments, like investing in government bonds or company bonds, and get returns in between 5 and 10%. That's impacting. But as I said before, there's also this amount of money which is already committed for the VCs, so they need to put it back on the market. So I don't know how long is it going to take. Maybe if mergers and acquisitions start accelerating, that could be the signal that this is going to change. When? If I knew it, I wouldn't tell you guys. I will become rich myself.
Of course.
Now, my advice for entrepreneurs, besides what they say, with which I fully agree with, it's try to focus on the things you can change. So, I mean, don't be scared about hyperinflation or that it's taking longer to raise the funds or that. Just plan for it, and try to find the opportunity within this change. If you have, as you said, if you have a powerful solution that really is on the benefit of the clients, they will still be buying you, And if you accelerate that traction, it's going to be easier also. So focus on the things that you can change. Just, adjust, stop crying, and look for the way to, get over it.
Good. Thank you. Well, we are over with the time. Thanks for coming and attending the panel, and thanks to all of you to be here in Bilbao and be part of this panel as well. So great. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you so much. Great panelists. Thank you.